All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Training for Hiking Q&A. My name is Rowan Smith, and I'm answering your questions about training for hiking. Now, essentially, the way these Q&As work is very simple. If there's anyone watching live who does have any particular questions they're interested in around training for hiking, physical preparation, or anything like that in the world of hiking, pop them in chat, and I'm happy to have a conversation and talk through in as much detail as you like. Beyond that, I've also got a few questions that have been sent through prior to this, where basically people have sent through. I'm going to be covering in a bit of detail and give a little bit of context. Now, today's call will probably go for about 40 minutes or so, depending on how many live questions we get. So we'll see how we roll. So while we're waiting for any live questions to come through, let's cover the first one. And we're going to be talking a little bit about interval training. Now, essentially, the question for here was like, hey, Rowan, I tried the aerobic power intervals that you always talk about. I find them quite easy. I actually usually do some Tabata workouts. What was I doing wrong? And yeah, I thought this was a really useful topic to talk about in this situation because I think a lot of hikers do fall themselves into it. In the sense of, for the context of this question, if you haven't sort of seen me talk about this before, one of my favorite interval training workouts, and interval training is basically doing some type of cardio training where you do periods of quick versus periods of slow. So you go quick, slow, quick, slow, quick, slow, as opposed to just going for long periods of time. And essentially, one of my favorite interval workouts for hikers is what's called aerobic power intervals. Now, what these intervals are all about is doing periods of anywhere from 2.5 minutes to 3.5 minutes of quick work, where you're on a bike or a stationary cycle or an elliptical or something like that. And you're going for about 2.5 to 3.5 minutes of quick work, really pushing the speed, get yourself quite out of breath. And at the end, you have about a minute and a half rest, and you repeat that a bunch of times. Now, this can be a really fantastic workout because it's really beneficial at improving breathing on steep ascents. And there's a little bit of science behind this workout around like why it can be so effective at that. But essentially, what we're trying to do in this situation is develop the ability of your body to develop the aerobic energy system at the maximal intensity you can sustain. Now, aerobic energy system is the most relevant energy system for hikers, and this is essentially hitting the highest intensities it can sustain. So it can help us in these type of sections on the trail. If you want to learn a little bit more about this workout before I even get into it, I've got a video on the YouTube here, which kind of covers it a little bit, gives a little bit demonstration, talks through some tips and everything like that. It's not really like I'm not going to go through it right now because it's a little bit, it's not very exciting. It's just watching Andrew on the bike. But when you can hear the video on that, you can check it all out. So I will drop this in chat and you can sort of check this out if you like. Getting back to the question. Yeah, so what's going on here? Now, realistically, in the world of fitness, a lot of people are familiar with interval training. And in the general world of fitness, they would have done things like 45 seconds quick and 15 seconds slow, or doing something like 20 seconds quick and 10 seconds slow, which is like Tabata training. These are approaches to interval training, which are just really popular all around the world. You could jump into any sort of like group class anywhere around the world, and you'll probably get exposed to one of two of these things. Very common. And essentially, these particular approaches to interval training, what a lot of people may be familiar with, they're very popular because they're kind of, I guess, almost like a catch-all approach to training. In the sense, if we're looking at going, doing periods of 45 seconds quick, 15 seconds slow, it doesn't really matter how experienced you are. It doesn't really matter how fit you are. It doesn't really matter how hard you work or whatever it may be. You're still probably going to get a decent workout. In the sense, if people come into those sessions and say they haven't trained at all, and they enter one of these gyms and they're completely unfit, they do a workout of 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off, they may just go at a really casual pace. Like they may just not work very hard at all, but they can end up still getting a decent workout purely for the fact that there's quite a bit of work, 45 seconds, and you're not having a huge amount of rest. So they end up just kind of having a continuous workout without a huge amount of rest. Alternatively, for people who've done it a little bit, they're kind of average levels of fitness, you can kind of work at a relatively moderate pace for this type of stuff. So you're not taking it super easy, but you're also not like absolutely flogging yourself, and you can still get a good workout. And then for very fit people who have been doing this for ages, they kind of like to push things a little bit more, they can actually push the pace a lot and get a really good workout for this. And ultimately, these things here Typically in the world of general fitness, in the world of training, they're very, very popular because everyone can get a good workout. Doesn't require a huge amount of thought, doesn't require a huge amount of specificity or anything. Anyone can get a good workout. And this can be really, really good just for general fitness and weight loss, because realistically, for those types of things, it doesn't really matter what types of training you do, as long as you're getting a decent workout, you're working relatively hard, and it's kind of doable for you. So that kind of works out pretty well. When we are looking in the world of training for hiking, and when we're really, really trying to hone in and developing your hiking abilities and developing your fitness as a hiker, typically with the interval training, the way that I like to approach it is we want to get a little bit better, as opposed to just doing these kind of like generic things where it's kind of catch all, it's good, gets you working, but it's not really honed into anything in particular. We can actually sort of say, hey, the body has these certain energy systems that produces energy in different situations. If we can reverse engineer our training to target these energy systems and develop those energy systems so they can get better and better, we can use them better on the trail, we can get a really, really good benefits for our hiking from our interval training. And this is sometimes known as energy system development, which is a fancy word of saying interval training, which is actually honed in a little bit more. Now, going back to the aerobic power intervals, the aerobic power intervals are designed to work on that very, very particular aspect of fitness, that aerobic power, that topmost level of that particular energy system, which for hikers can be really, 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 really useful. Um, However, the way this is structured is it's not kind of a catch-all thing in regards to how, whatever you do, is it going to be effective? We need to be going with a little bit more intent and a little bit more thought. So you can't just go into these workouts and absolutely zone out, expect you're going to have a good workout. You kind of want to put a little bit more intention around it. So when we're looking at this, coming back to the original answer, I know there's been a very, very roundabout way of saying it. Ultimately, when it comes down to any type of structured interval training, you just need to manage your intensity. If you go into an interval training workout and it's supposed to be a relatively difficult workout, you just need to manage your intensity. If things feel a bit too easy, you ultimately just need to push a bit harder. Because if you're used to doing this quick, slow, quick, slow, quick, slow, but just having these very, very short periods of rest, um, it can take a little bit of like wrapping your head around to sort of say, all right, I've actually got to go quick for 2.5 minutes and I'm going to rest for 90 seconds. Like it's just a little bit of wrapping your head around. With this, you can go at any pace, you'll still get tired. So what I'm trying to say is if it does feel a bit easy, you need to push a little bit quicker. You need to push so you basically by the end of the 2.5 minutes, whatever you're doing, you're like, I really do need a rest. And then when you're looking at this 1.5 minutes rest, the first 30 seconds, you might be really, really out of breath. The next 30 seconds, you might be like, moderate breathing. And then the next 30 seconds, you kind of get everything back to almost baseline. So you're ultimately starting the interval almost fresh. It won't be 100% fresh because, fatigue will accumulate, whatever it may be. But you kind of want enough rest so you can actually push really hard. So if you do feel it's a little bit easy, you just need to push harder, ultimately. Where am I? Alternatively, if you go into this type of workout, you're like, hey, actually, I tried this and I can only go 90 seconds and then I absolutely die and I just cannot get any further before I need a rest. Then you need to, again, regulate your intensity. You need to go a little bit easier. So you're kind of hitting that limit point at the end of the interval. So that's the other side of things where people sometimes get a little bit struggle. And ultimately, with these types of workouts, you can make them as hard or as easy as you want, regardless of what level of fitness. And I can give this same workout to an absolute beginner to the most experienced mountaineer, the most fit mountaineer that I'm working with. And both of them can get a good workout as long as they work at the right intensity for themselves. So it's never a case that this workout is too easy. It's just a case of you having to adjust your intensity. Um, so if you've ever actually tried any of the interval structures that I recommend, whether you've done the aerobic power intervals, whether you've done like I sometimes talk about the 30-30s, which is 30 seconds quick, 30 seconds slow, whether you've done some longer intervals, or sometimes I talk about 6-minute intervals where you go 6 minutes moderately fast and 1 minute slow, or maybe 4 minutes fast and 1 minute slow, whatever it may be. Ultimately, when you're looking at all of this, you just need to adjust your intensity, adjust your speed, adjust the difficulty so you can kind of get the right level of difficulty for you, because all of these workouts can be just as hard as each other. It's just a slightly different durations, slightly different ways, slightly different targets. So yeah, long answer short, when it comes down to interval training, just adjust your intensity, and that's the way to do it. So hopefully that answers that question. Now, coming down as we're going through, if anyone is watching live does have any particular questions they'd like covered, feel free to just plug them in the chat. I'm happy to go through it. Now, next question that I want to cover. Let me make this a little bit bigger so people can see. Next question that I wanted to cover that has been sent through to me was pack weight versus body weight percentages. And this is one I probably get once every couple of months or whatever it may be. And basically the question was, I heard that that I should never really carry a pack more than 20% of my body weight. Is that true? Now, this is something, as I said, I get all the time, and you'll often see these common recommendations online, about this, where people sort of say on websites, articles, talking podcasts, or whatever it may be, people say you should never really carry more than 20 to 25% of your body weight in your pack. So if you were, say, a 50 kilo person, 25% of 50 kilos would be, oh gosh, making me do with maths. I don't know, 5 kilos, 5 times 5, 25. That's not right. 12 and a half kilos. My gosh, doing math. Yeah, and you shouldn't be carrying more than 12 and a half kilos or whatever it may be. And ultimately, a lot of hikers out there, and this is usually the kind of lighter hikers, the people who may not be super heavy, and they're like, well, 20% of my body weight isn't actually a huge amount. They're a little bit worried about this for multi-day or longer hikes. So sometimes people get obsessive about this. They can start like doing their pack and they're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make this lighter? They start spending all this money. They start freaking out and it can be a little bit difficult. So, and you'll often see this bounce around all the time. Now, ultimately, for this recommendation, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think kind of where it does come from is it's just like a general catch-all statement in the sense that for the general population, if we're just looking at everyone in an absolute general population, and hikers, and you sort of think it doesn't do any training, this probably isn't a bad recommendation. If you're just like, if we took 100 hikers and none of them were doing any particular training, and we were saying you're all going to get up to, a certain amount of pack weight, and if you all stayed at this sort of limit, it's probably a good limit. However, obviously, as a generalization, whether it comes to training or anything, like generalizations are good in general, but everyone is their own individual. And there's so many individual factors that can affect person to person to person and affect this type of thing. Realistically, when it comes down to this, and what I always tell people this when I actually get asked it, is if you are training and if you are actively training and actively developing yourself and you are doing the right things in your training and you're not just doing random things, these kind of broad statements don't really hold up. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, the body in itself is an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly resilient and adaptable thing. And as long as you introduce challenges to it, so this is like in this context pack weight, but we could look at any type of exercise or any type of stress to it. So long as we introduce this challenge in a gradual way, in a smart way, and slowly, slowly, slowly introduce and build up over time, the body can ultimately adapt to almost anything. And it can be absolutely crazy what types of things it can get used to as long as you gradually introduce it. And this can be both good and bad. When it comes down to pack weight, what I've really seen for most people, there isn't a max pack weight which will keep you safe. There isn't sort of saying, hey, you have to hit this percentage or keep it below this percentage that can keep you safe. It is very, very, very possible to go way beyond these percentages, 20 to 25%, and get up to 30, 40, or even have people like 50% of their pack weight, of their body weight, as long as they build up to it, as long as they do the right training, as long as they gradually introduce this stress and gradually introduce this load. Because if you were doing nothing and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going on a multi-day hike and I jump up to a 30% of my body weight in my pack, yeah, that's a rule for trouble, a sign of trouble, and it probably won't work very well. But if you gradually build up to something, you kind of get used to it. So when you're looking at gradually building up to things, you want to make sure you are gradually building up your general strength and general endurance, doing strength training, developing strength through the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the back, the glutes, the core, the upper body. All of these things make a big difference for pack. We want to make sure we're regularly conditioning the body to the specific demands of pack work. So doing things like loaded pack walking around your neighborhood, doing things like stair hill sessions where you slowly introduce the pack weight and week by week by week, we get a little bit heavier. And on top of that, we gradually build up weight of pack on the trail. So when you're looking at, okay, I want to get up to a 30 kilo pack by a certain endpoint, making sure week by week by week, we're gradually building things up. That's really the secret sauce for this type of thing. And you can really get to anywhere you want as long as you're doing those things in a way that is smart, in a way that is logical, the way that's gradual, and the way that is consistent. Now, the key to this, as I've said like 5 times now, it is gradual. in the sense that you need to be smart, you need to be slow with this. So typically, beg pardon, and when we're looking at training hikes, as I sort of mentioned here, as a long-term thing, what you want to be doing is you want to start off at a point which is light, easy, it's comfortable. You're not starting the deep end where it's already a struggle, but you're starting off light. And then each hike you do, or every couple of hikes you do, depending on your timeline, you typically increase no more than 1 to 2 kilos, or like 4 to 11 pounds, or whatever it may be. This isn't set in stone. Like it's not like you have 100% have to do this or you'll get injured, but it's a nice rule of thumb. So if you ultimately want to get up to a 30 kilo pack and you're like, okay, I need to add on an extra kilo or two each week, then that means probably you need to have a minimum of maybe 15 weeks of training. So you can add on 2 kilos a week. Then you may start at like 5 kilos or maybe a little bit shorter or whatever it may be. You just need to be gradual. I see things online where people like jump up their pack weight by like 4 kilos a week or 5 kilos a week and this and that. And yeah, I just don't think that's great. So you want to be smart here. So ultimately, long story short, if you are a lighter hiker and you're looking at these percentages and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really worried about my pack weight. Or alternatively, if you're just someone who just likes having a heavy pack, you're like, hey, I like the idea of carrying a cast iron pan so I can have bacon and eggs on the trail, which I have heard people do, which is fair enough. And you're like, hey, my pack weight's going to be way heavier than that 20%, then that's fine. Just make sure you get your prep right. Make sure you're doing your training and you can get ready for pretty much anything as long as you are doing that. So long story short, be smart with your training and you can get there. On top of that is what I'll share. I think I have a video that talks through this. Maybe I don't. Um, how to train to carry a heavy pack. Here's a little video which talks through a little bit of extra information around pack training. I'll pop that in chat so you can check that out for anyone who is interested in that. So next up, as before I get into the next questions, anyone who is watching live who is interested in any questions, you got anything you'd like answered, please just pop it in chat. I'm happy to cover anything you like and dive into things in a little bit of detail for you. So next question, while we're waiting for any questions to come through, we're going to talk about barbells for hikers. And the question that I sort of got sent through was like, hey, I read somewhere that I should be doing barbell back squats and deadlifts, and they're probably the best things I could be doing for my strength, for my hiking. But I never see you recommend them. I'm curious about what your thoughts are here. So if you haven't really come across them before, you're not 100% sure what I'm talking about, a barbell back squat is something like this, where you basically in the gym, you got a barbell, put it on your back and going up and down with squats. A pretty standard exercise you'll see in gyms all around the world. That's a barbell back squat. Now, the barbell deadlift is very, very similar, basically like a big bar down, starting down on the floor, and you're standing up and working here. Now, the back squat's designed to work the quadriceps, a little bit of the glutes. The deadlift's designed to work the hamstrings, a little bit of the glutes. Basically, when it comes down to this, there is no denying that these exercises, barbell back squats and barbell deadlifts, are great exercises for developing strength. They are stock standard around the world. A lot of athletes use them. A lot of general population uses them. They can be fantastic at developing strength through those areas. And when it comes down to the training that I do with my hikers, I do have a few of my hikers and mountaineers in the background who do them. And I would sort of say maybe 2%, 3%, maybe 4% of the people I work with will do these exercises. But I don't have a huge amount of my clients doing them. And one thing I never really do is I never really recommend them online. I never really sort of say in my videos, like, hey, you should be doing this. I never really say, even in my courses, like, hey, here are good options or whatever it may be. I never really sort of push them in regards to the hiking community. Now, the reason behind this is, these exercises, there is no denying that they can be beneficial. There's no denying that they can be useful and no denying that they can develop strength. And a lot of people do see a lot of good success with these things. But on the flip side, a lot of people do have issues with these things as well. And a lot of people have had experiences where they've maybe done deadlifts in the past and maybe they haven't been doing them quite right, or maybe they got carried away with their weight or whatever it may be, and they've ended up getting a sore back. Same thing with back squats. A lot of people have done these and gotten sore backs or sore knees or whatever it may be. And a lot of people in the past have issues with these things. And in my kind of context and who I am and what I do is I'm an online coach. All the hikers that I work with is remote. I'm not in person to person. I did that for years and years and years, but I don't really do that anymore. And on top of that, all the content that I talk about, these videos, my podcast, my posts and all of that, it reaches a broad range of hikers. There are some hiking coaches out there who kind of just talk to people who are like ex-military, who are like, that's kind of the people they're talking to. There's people who are talking to a sort of hiking audiences which are maybe a little bit more gym orientated or whatever it may be. But hikers that I talk to is kind of a broad range of hikers. A lot of the hikers I work with, yeah, some people and the people who follow my content will have lots and lots of experience in the gym. They've trained in the gym for years and years and years. They've done lots of barbell work. They're very, very comfortable with that. But in all honesty, that's maybe 15, 20% of kind of my following. I would sort of say that most of the people that I kind of talk to don't really have a huge amount of experience. You may have done gym training in the past, you may have done classes in the past, maybe you've done these sort of things, but these exercises can take years and years and years and years to master. I do them myself, but I've been doing them for 20 years. Yeah, 20 years, and I'm still improving. I'm still learning. I'm still developing. Ultimately, when it comes down to the way I present my ideas for hiking, is there's two things I always keep in mind. Number one is obviously we want our ideas, we want exercises, our workouts to be effective. We want them to improve the things we're improving so you can get the best results on the trail. Now, also, really make sure that everything I recommend has a low risk of things going wrong. There's never going to be zero risk. There's always a chance of something being uncomfortable for certain people. There's always a chance of having accidents or whatever it may be, but having as low risk as possible of things going wrong. So when we're looking at barbell squats and deadlifts, these may be very, very effective, but in all honesty, they just have too much risk for a lot of people. I'm not saying they're risky exercises inherently, but a lot of people just don't know how to do them. They just don't do them quite well. They get carried around with weights and this and that. And if they're not paying attention, sometimes they get sore. I don't want that for hikers. I don't want people getting sore. I don't want people to be scared of strength training. Hiking is the end goal. We want to be comfortable for hiking, so we don't want to risk ourselves hurting ourselves in the gym. On top of this, a lot of this are for people. These exercises can be intimidating for a lot of people. Like some people don't have a huge amount of experience with strength training. They look at these and like, that's scary. I'm a little bit worried about that, whether you've done them in the past. Or a lot of people, they may just not be accessible. Like, yes, if you have a gym membership, most gyms will have this, but a lot of hikers don't like the gym. They train at home with home equipment or whatever it may be. And ultimately, when we're talking about strength training for hiking, I don't want barriers for people. I want people to enter their strength training, get good advice, get the benefits from it as quickly as possible. For the majority of hikers out there, we can honestly get strong enough doing exercises which have a lot more room for error. So even if you're not doing them perfectly, they're still fine. Even if you can make a mistake, they're not really going to get you too uncomfortable, whatever it may be. And also exercises which are much more accessible for the majority of hikers. So as I was saying before, the barbell back squat, that's typically looking at quadricep strength, maybe a little bit of glutes. Two options we can look at is box pistol squats or split squats. So let me see. I'm going to pull up some videos here. So this one's kind of like, this is an assessment video, but this will do the job. This one's kind of looking at that box pistol squat I mentioned before, where we're kind of on a chair or a bench or something like that. And literally what we're doing is we're pushing up. What's going on in my video? And we're pushing up and down on one leg. Now, the way to make you can make this more difficult is you can use a lower box, you can hold a weight here, you can have a pack on your back or whatever it may be. Now, this particular exercise, it can be awesome at developing strength for the quadriceps. It can be a really big challenge, but it has a lot of room for error. And even if you don't do this perfectly or whatever it may be, it can be, pretty good. Another option for the squats is doing something like a split squat. So where are we? I have so many videos. I should have prepped this before. Doing something like this, which is like a split squat. So very similar to a lunge, but it's basically just having legs in one place. Essentially, what we're doing is we're coming down and up, and working through this. And a split squat again, very effective for developing strength through the quads, and much less risk of things going wrong. And if we want to get this heavy, if we want to make this difficult, we can hold a dumbbell or two, we can wear a pack on our back, or we can go into things like a Bulgarian split squat or something like that. Alternatively, if we're looking at like hamstrings and glutes, we may do like a single leg deadlift variation. So, like for example, this one, rear foot elevated deadlift. This one can be a really good option, developing hamstring and glute strength. But again, a lot more room for going on than a typical barbell deadlift. You can load this up pretty heavy and load this up pretty difficult, but it's not going to really have a risk of things going wrong. And we can look at like glute bridges and hip thrust variations and stuff like that. So long story short, when it comes down to this, all the stuff that I typically talk about is practical versus optimal. Yes, in the training context, there are some things in the perfect world. If you're 100% confident, have all the access in the world, it may be optimal. If you were fully experienced and I was standing there with you in the gym, maybe doing back squats and barbell deadlifts may be optimal, because we can load it up, we can challenge the strength in a really, really, really tough way and this and that. But on the practical side of things, it has a few drawbacks. And in all honesty, hikers can get where they need to be without these types of things. Hikers aren't powerlifters, hikers aren't bodybuilders, hikers are purely trying to build strength for the trail, and we can do that really without too much. If you like barbell squats and deadlifts, then absolutely go right ahead. Do them if you're confident with them. If it doesn't cause you issues, go right ahead. But if you don't worry. If you read an article or see a video and someone's like, hey, you should be doing this, it's the best thing in the world or whatever it may be, yeah, maybe not, in all honesty. So, with that being said, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Hopefully that helps a few people, and hopefully this kind of gives a little bit of context for a few things that have popped up for this week. So at this stage, don't have any questions come through the chat. So yeah, from my side of things, that's kind of everything that I kind of wanted to cover today. So with no more questions, yeah, I might sort of wrap things up here. So for anyone watching, I really do hope you've enjoyed this. If you do have any questions or follow-up questions from this, feel free to plug it in the chat, and I'll pick it up for the next Q&A. On top of that, if anyone does have any questions they'd like me to cover in future chats, feel free to send it through to me. I can kind of break things down here as well. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for